And this is not a problem that's going to go away. The US Department of Agriculture, for example, is predicting food inflation of about 3 to 4% for the year ahead. But is it right to blame the actions of traders on the financial markets? Well, from this studio in London, we brought together two men who couldn't disagree more. From New York, campaigning journalist Frederick Kaufman, who wrote the book Bet the Farm. And from Singapore, highly successful investor Jim Rogers, author of Hot Commodities. I asked Jim if he's still betting on food for 2013.
Oh, Philip, one of the most exciting parts of the world economy in the next decade is going to be agriculture. Everybody listening to this show should become a farmer. I cannot think of anything more exciting.
Or perhaps a trader.
Yes, I mean, I would be a hopeless farmer. I would go broke, I'm sure, but other people can invest in agriculture.
Frederick Kaufman, how do you see the market today?
Well, Jim, it's probably pretty good you made the decision to be an investor, not a farmer, because the farmers happen to be going broke all across the world, and the 2 billion poorest farmers who feed half the world no longer can make a living farming simply because of the commodities markets driving up the cost of their inputs, their diesel, their insecticide, their seeds. This is an outrage, and bankers need to get out of the business.
Frederick, this is embarrassing that you would say things like that. If the price of food doesn't go up, where are we going to get food? Are you going to go into the fields and become a farmer?
This is the kind of thing I hear all the time when I'm out there. Oh, yes, we can solve global hunger. If it just becomes more expensive, then it'll be more valuable and more people will go into it. What an outrage. The people who are making money are the traders, and that's why people are getting out of it.
Frederick Kaufman, how would you distinguish between the transactions which are needed for stability? Farmers have to hedge against food price fluctuations. What's the difference in your eyes between, good transactions and, for you, bad speculative transactions?
I am not against commodity markets per se. They're some of the most fabulously structured markets really in the history of markets. And for more than 100 years, they really did help stabilize the price of food. But really what happened is since the 1990s, new financial derivatives based on food, many of them created by Goldman Sachs and followed by the largest banks on earth, realized there is going to be tremendous value in food going forward. So they created all these crazy food derivatives, kind of like those derivatives that brought the world economy to its knees in 2008. And then once these derivatives are in place, they opened up the door for this what's called a new form of asset allocation. So hundreds of billions of new dollars could pour into these markets, subverted these markets. The balance that drove these markets and made them work has been completely destroyed.
But Frederick, the average age of farmers in America is 58. In Japan, it's 66.
Jim, getting bankers out of the food business is only going to help farmers.
Frederick, in America, more people study public relations, including you, it sounds like, than study agriculture. Farmers are dying out, and no young people are going into agriculture. If the price of wheat doesn't go up, and all the farmers die, and the young people go into public relations
this is such
and
a
journalism.
False notion you're bringing up, Jim. This is such a Trojan horse. Can I give you a little fact here, Jim? Every year, farmers make more than twice the amount of food needed to feed the earth. You're still stuck in this supply and demand, college-level economics, okay? The fact of the matter is that there's plenty of supply out there.
Well, do you know what?
Then why are the inventory so low?
At this point, I just want to take us back to facts, because one of the things I want to look at is it's clear the commodities market historically changed hugely, we were saying, in the early 90s. And then if you looked at 2008, for example, you had a massive rise in many food commodity prices, which I know, Frederick, you see as a global speculative frenzy. And Jim, I want to put you, the numbers of those in the world who are now food insecure, who do struggle to buy staples, rose dramatically at a point where the markets were jumping onto food as a good investment. Isn't that something that is at all unnerving?
Who's going to produce the food if the price doesn't go up
This
to
isn't
encourage
about
farmers?
Food production, though, is it necessarily? It's about trading in derivatives rather than actually handing over bushels
There are
of wheat.
two sides to this problem.
Wait a minute, Frederick. I want to hear James's
Hold on.
answer
Yes.
on this.
Philip, let's say you're right, that somebody drove up the price of wheat. Well, if there weren't shortages of wheat, the price would collapse, and all of those evil speculators would go broke. But the facts are the world's running out of food, the inventories are near historic lows, and we're running out of farmers.
Except for one fact. In 2008, farmers produced more wheat than ever in the history of farmers producing wheat.
Well, then why didn't the speculators go broke?
Because what happened is these futures price of wheat, Jim, you know exactly what happened, started bubbling up way above the spot price. And there was a speculative frenzy because there was fear, just as you say, there's not enough food. Food is going to biofuels. India and China are eating different diets. And there was a speculative frenzy. And plus, at that same time, where do you put all your cash? You understand this, Jim. Where is the cash? What? Equity markets were tanking. The real estate markets were tanking. The credit markets were tanking. Okay, where do we put our money? Commodities. And that is what happened, and that is still what is happening. And we're seeing volatility like we've never seen before in these markets.
But Frederick, if the price went up and there was a huge amount of wheat, the farmers would have dumped it on the speculators, and the speculators would have gone broke. This is some kind of, you don't understand how markets work.
I would like to press you, Frederick, on part of this, which is we're talking about speculation as an engine of driving prices and creating volatility. What about the other side of it? What about rising demand? You mentioned the BRICS countries, the booming middle classes in China, in India, in Brazil. Surely rising demand is a main driver of food prices.
Rising demand is a driver of food prices, and all across the board we're seeing constraints on supply, including climate change. We're seeing drought, flood. We're seeing all those things.
So is it unfair to hit the bankers purely for this and the traders?
No. So what's the perception then as currencies across the world are kind of losing value? The bankers are saying, where can we put our money and we know that we're going to get a good return? And so they think, where are there the most supply constraints? Where will there be the most demand? And they have pumped it into this sector. And so we have doubling prices and prices doubling on top of that. And so the question becomes, well, how can we precisely say what is demand, what is speculation? How can we actually give a mathematical formula? And the problem is, looking back on it, as Jim well knows, and he's using this for his argument, it's very hard to discern what is speculative money from what is bona fide hedging money. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the open interest, you can see that speculators now outnumber the hedgers 4-1. The markets have been upended.
Jim, is this a perception problem or an actual problem? You have, for example, Barclays talking openly about reputational risk from continuing to deal in food commodities.
Yes, there's no question that you had the people like the campaign group going around saying this is all because of evil speculators.
I'm not saying evil speculators. I'm just putting you together to talk about it.
You're the only one who said evil, Jim.
Let's just let Jim finish this thought.
There's certainly a huge campaign out there to make it sound like all this is supply problems, and yes, they're demand problems. But it's very easy for people like the campaign group to say these people should not be allowed to invest.
So it's a PR problem. That's what you're saying? It's just a bunch of PR guys.
I want to ask you again, if the price doesn't go up, where are we going to get the food? Who's going to go into the field
What's so outrageous
12 hours a day in the hot sun? Do you know that the highest rate of suicide in the UK is in agriculture?
What is so outrageous here is making farmers' life more miserable than ever before. And all of a sudden, you, the banker, are the great champion of the poor farmer.
Several million farmers have committed suicide in India in the past few years because they couldn't make a living. Now, I would like for you to
correct.
go.
They're being
I would like for you to go to the widows and say to them, should prices have been higher or lower? I would like to go to the 15 or 20 million orphans in India and say, gosh, is it good that the prices are low, or is it good that the prices would be higher so your father would still be alive?
Jim, what would you say also to consumers? Because here in the UK, but not only here, of course, there's been an issue with staple food prices rising.
And the prices are going to go much higher. Millions of farmers have committed suicide or have gone into the cities because they cannot make a living.
This is the classic sophistry that I hear again and again, every single argument.
Well, give me an answer. Just give me an answer.
I will, Jim. There are two prices, and you know it well. There's the spot price, which is what the farmers get, and there's the futures price, which is what happens on the exchanges. And what you're seeing is the industrialization of food, this huge phenomena of major corporations getting into it, are pushing down the price that small farmers get for their food and forcing them out of the business. At the same time, there is another phenomena, the securitization or the financialization of food. And that is a phenomena that happens on the markets, and those prices are bubbling up, making it really difficult for consumers to afford their food and driving more than the combined populations of America, Canada, and Europe, more than 870 million people into hunger.
I'm going
This
to
is
ask-
an outrage.
Did you not listen to the program before when the farmer was saying he uses the markets to sell so he can get a good price?
Did you not
were
listen
you
when
paying
I said these
attention?
markets worked very well for years and years and years for price discovery and risk management, and they have been subverted by these new financial derivatives?
But Frederick, I explained to you.
Gentlemen,
you should do your homework,
gentlemen, I'm
Frederick.
going to give you both a space in which we can look at where it should go from here. Frederick, first, we hear what you're saying about speculation and the role that it's playing. Now, given that you're not going to stop the behaviour of markets, what is your prescription?
The simplest thing to do is to bring position limits back to the markets. So we say to the bankers and the largest financial institutions, all right, you can bet on food, but only so much. There were position limits in this country, in America, really from the FDR period until the mania of deregulation in the late 90s. And then all of a sudden the door opened, and all of a sudden they were allowed to make as large a bet as they liked.
But we're
in
looking
global
forward.
food.
What should happen now, Frederick?
Yeah, so the door should be closed. That's
and if it's
global.
closed, it has to be closed. It can't just be closed in one market, can it?
This is a global problem and it needs a global solution. And what we have to have are global position limits for financial institutions in global food. We have to push them out. The other thing that we can do is we can add more transparency to the market. Did you know that there are no insider trading rules in commodities? In other words, in equities, you can go to jail for trading on insider information, not in commodities. The other thing that we can do is add grain reserves. In America, for instance, we got rid of our national strategic grain reserve. These grain reserves help moderate spiking prices. So those are three things that we can do pretty quickly to help moderate the situation.
Jim Rogers, you deal in this, you know your markets, you know the trends. Do you feel that there is room for any more regulation?
Well, I'm a little astonished at some of the things Frederick says. It shows that he doesn't know much about markets. If you're saying we should build up food reserves, that's going to add to demand. So the prices have to go higher. You're saying there's insider trading. What insider trading? Rice is raised in hundreds of countries around the world. What insider trading could there possibly be? My suggestion is that Frederick and all of his friends and the people from the campaign group go into the fields every day, 12 hours a day, work for nothing, so that all of us can sit in Paris or wherever, have cheap pâté, cheap champagne. Frederick, we will toast you. We will say it's wonderful that you're out there working for nothing so that we can all have cheap food. But in the meantime, we're not going to have any food because you're going to get pretty tired of it and you're going to quit just like all the other farmers are quitting too.
Investor Jim Rogers and writer Fred Kaufman generating a lot of heat and we hope throwing some light on the business of food commodity trading. Our main headline: Pakistani officials have condemned the killing of 7 teachers and health workers as they left a community centre in northwest Pakistan. It's thought they may have been targeted because of their involvement in polio vaccination programmes and in female education. And that's the world tonight. This is Philippa Thomas from me and the rest of the team. Good night to you.